There is huge news out of Hollywood where stars and extras alike are going out on strike after weeks of negotiations with studios have failed. The Screen Actors Guild has been unable to agree with major studios and streaming giants on a deal over issues around pay and safeguards against the use of artificial intelligence.
With screenwriters already striking, the decision means dozens of TV and movie productions will grind to a halt and send shockwaves through production industries globally.
It's a very serious thing that impacts thousands, if not millions of people all across this country and around the world. Not only members of this union, but people who work in other industries that service the people that work in this industry. And so it came with great sadness that we came to this crossroads, but we had no choice. We are the victims here. We are being victimized by a very greedy entity. I am shocked by the way the people that we have been in business with are treating us.
Well, our North America correspondent Carrington Clark is following the story. Carrington, good morning. What have the performers been asking for?
Yeah, I mean, you just heard the words there from Fran Drescher, the star of the 1990s sitcom The Nanny. Some strong language. She's the president of the union that represents the Screen Actors. And what they say is that the current deal that they've been offered from the big studios and the big streamers does not account for the seismic changes that we've seen in the industry, mainly because of the technological changes that have happened over the last decade. In particular, the rise of streaming as a way that people consume their productions, their work. They say that the agreement means that they're not receiving a fair cut of the profits that the studios are making. The old system was that not only would the actors receive upfront payments, but you would also receive residuals as your work was played. So if you had a film that went to the box office, you might receive your upfront payment and maybe a cut of that box office, but then you'd receive subsequent payments when it went to a DVD or went to television. What they're saying is that the current streaming arrangements are either cutting out the residual payments altogether, or it's so minuscule that it's making it very difficult for people who aren't on large salaries to make ends meet. Now, this echoes what we've heard from the Writers Guild, the Writers Union, who have been on strike now for 10 weeks and counting. They also say that the agreement that the streamers in particular are offering just doesn't get them by. And although there is a lot of money in this industry, Hollywood is one of America's biggest earners and is obviously very culturally important. And there are people at the top end who make a lot of money. There are other people who are making far less, either struggling to get by or making enough to just make it an honest day's wage. But they say they're being particularly hurt by the agreement that's being offered. And this is affecting Australians who are working over in Hollywood as well. I spoke to SAG-AFTRA earlier today, and he says that he's happy that his union is taking this stance because they need to get a fair deal.
Now, also, this is very important to understand. They have not been negotiating with the Writers Guild since the Writers Guild went on strike around about 7 weeks ago. So they put all that on pause to hope in the anticipation that the Screen Actors Guild would have reached an agreement by this stage. We have not. So now we enter into one of the most tumultuous and I think not quite unprecedented, but probably one of the most important industrial actions in the film and television history.
We have heard from one of the biggest players in the industry, that's the CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, earlier today. He was speaking to CNBC. He says that what the union is requesting on behalf of Screen Actors is just not feasible. And although there is a lot of money being generated in the streaming services, the business model is still being worked out, and that he is disappointed that they've walked away from these negotiations.
So the big question now, and this will absolutely be front of mind for people in Australia as well, people in the industry, what is going to be the impact on films, TV, series underway?
Yeah, so we've already obviously been seeing impacts because the writers have been on strike for this 10-week period, and that's meant that no one was able to act in a writing capacity during that period. Now, there have been productions that have continued because the writing has already been set in stone. They weren't allowed to do rewrites except in very limited circumstances, but the actors were still able to turn up. Other members of the cast and crew were able to turn up. What this effectively means is that Hollywood as we know it is at a standstill. And this is the first time since 1960 that these two huge unions have stopped, have in unison agreed to stop work. So this is going to have an immediate impact in Hollywood. It will also impact productions in Australia if they've signed a deal with the Screen Actors Guild in America. So this will have flow-on effects around the world. And we've seen a most immediate impact. One of the biggest films of this summer in the Northern Hemisphere of this year, Oppenheimer, had its premiere actually pulled forward over in the UK, and we heard from the director there who was explaining why two of the stars, Cillian Murphy and Emily Blunt, had chosen to not stay for the premiere.
We have to acknowledge, you've seen them here earlier on the red carpet. Unfortunately, they're off to write their picket signs for what we believe to be an imminent strike by SAG, joining my guild, one of my guilds, the Writers Guild, in the struggle for fair wages for the working members of those unions.
So words of encouragement there from Christopher Nolan, but that is an important point that actors are not only supposed to not work, they're also not supposed to be taking part in the promotion of any film. So although there might be films still coming to cinemas because they've already been effectively locked down, they've been finished, we're not going to see actors going out and supporting them in the promotion. And eventually, obviously, that funnel of productions will come to an end. So the question is, how quickly can a new deal be struck so that we're all still able to be entertained?
All right, Carrington, thanks for all the details.